I would like to introduce you Tim Dyke, who will lead this this workshop today. So enjoy it. And I'm Dana from Czech Republic, Czechia, and I'm as a Zoomer here today. And I am your technical support also.
So welcome to today. I'm not sure where this is going to head today. I actually don't have the answer to is coaching men and male leaders different, and I'm going to hope that we have a really good conversation. We'll include some breakout rooms to consider this question. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge, as we always do in Australia, I come to you today from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I respect their connection with lands, sky and sea, and their culture and language. This is an Aboriginal painting called The Artery, and unfortunately I don't have any further information about it. So I'm just fascinated and have become fascinated over the last 12 months or so with the concept of men in leadership. I'm a EMCC accredited senior practitioner. I'm also an EMCC global accreditation manager, and with responsibilities for Asia Pacific and the Americas. But that's not necessarily important today. It's just giving you some context. And I'm in a coaching collective called Leading Well in Australia. So a few things to start off with, because this can be quite a sensitive subject, the subject of gender with people. So I wanted to be sure that you understood where I was coming from. So I honour the fact that as a fundamental principle, we are all human. That's quite important in my readings that I've been doing around men and better able to coach men. It's a principle that comes up is that we are all human. And that may surprise people to think that that's so obvious and I have to state it, but it is very important in a coaching context. The spectrum of male, female, and male identifying and female identifying is very broad. We each have a gender identity and a gender expression. So identity, what we feel inside, expression, what we express on the outside. And we all live in worlds of gendered social constructs. So what that means is that society, our community, imposes certain expectations of us, whether we're male or female. But what we assume about the stereotypes, and I looked up the definition of stereotype because I use it quite often, and a good definition is it's a rule of thumb assessment. So it's an assessment that's a fairly basic assessment based on experience. So what we assume about stereotypes that we give people, for example, being male, being female, should be applied with caution. So there's a paradox here because I am talking about men as a stereotype, but I'm also saying to us we need to consider stereotypes in a very cautionary way. And the topic of gender in leadership and gender in coaching is quite complex. So we are coaches, and so what I'm hoping today is that we allow emergence of thoughts and perceptions that may have hindered us in the past or may enable our thinking and our clients' thinking and behaviour. I certainly come to you with no assumptions or judgments, and I ask you to enter this space with no assumptions or judgments, but we might see what assumptions and judgments we have around this topic. And my language is around what may be rather than what is definitely true. So I'm talking in generalisation here about men, and we're all individuals and we're all individual humans. So it's about what possibilities exist in coaching men rather than what is definitely existing when we coach men. There's a few quotes that I really like. Amanda Gorman stated this at a presidential induction: there is always light, if only we are brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it. I think I'm being very brave raising this topic of men in leadership, and but I'm doing it for the good of society, to try and get some conversation and some better understanding, and certainly some better awareness amongst men around their place in community and society. 3 quotes about men. Most men lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them. That's a very deep saying around, you know, most men are quite desperate, and they've got a song in them, but they don't sing it. Steve Biddulph, who's a very famous Australian author, says most men don't have a life. Instead, we have learned to pretend. Much of what men do is an outer show kept up for protection. He feels there must be more, but does not know what more is. A beautiful introduction for coaching men. And then a somewhat flippant comment from Michael Black is that traditional masculinity is an elaborate system of ritualised posturing, a kind of drag show. It's men in carefully assembled attire, lip-syncing the songs of their fathers and grandfathers. And then I'm not sure whether you know RuPaul and Chuck Norris. RuPaul is a drag star, a drag queen, and Chuck Norris is a very masculine cowboy sort of figure. And he says, sometimes I think the only thing separating RuPaul and Chuck Norris is glitter. And what he's meaning by that is that both the real man, in inverted commas, and the drag queen are both lip syncing the songs of fathers and grandfathers, or lip syncing songs. So, some facts. Some Australian data, some international data. In Australia, men occupy 80% of all manager positions, but less than 60% of all employees in Australia. And I've seen percentages of 85% of men in management positions. The share of seats going to male board members, I think in the last year in both the US and Europe, was over 50%. So that's people coming onto boards. Most of them were male, and the reference there is to a consultancy group, Heidrick and Struggles. Using Australian population data to get into some mental health aspects, 1 in 2 men will experience a mental health disorder in their lifetime, and suicide is the leading cause of death in men under age 55, and men account for 3 out of 4 suicides in Australia. With that context about men in leadership positions and also some mental health, and there's many more mental health facts that show some differences between men and women. There is little, and I've really searched the literature. I would say there's no specific research on the well-being of leaders specifically. If people have it, I'd love to see it. And certainly not on men in leadership positions. So people in leadership positions expecting to lead organisations, very little, I haven't been able to find it, specific research on their well-being. And there's very little research about coaching men specifically. I have not approached this as a balanced talk in talking about coaching men and coaching women. I've just focused on men. That is my area of interest at the moment, although in my coaching life and mentoring life, I span and have coached men, women, and transgender people. So the facts of the matter are, when we're approached to coach a client, one of the first assessments we do subconsciously is to say, yes, that's a man or that's a woman. So there's subconscious work that's going on as we coach or as we're introduced to a client, assessing people for who they are, who they may be, and certainly about their gender. So in breakout rooms, I just want you to focus on one or two of these questions, just something that might grab you. And we'll go into breakout rooms for about 10 minutes. So you get to do some contemplation, some reflection in breakout rooms with about 3 people about, have you been aware of gender dynamics in your coaching? So your interaction with a client, I'd be fascinated to know. And how does your own gender and gender experiences influence our coaching style when we're coaching men? I'd be interested to know, do you approach coaching men differently to coaching women? And also, how are male coachees seeing you? I talked to a coach the other day about this topic, and it was a male coach, and he said something like, "Oh well, yeah, I'm quite gender neutral in my coaching, and that you know, may be a common perception." But interestingly, that's what he was feeling about the coachee. And I just wonder how male coaches see us as coaches and our gender, and if that plays into what they talk about, how open they are, those types of things. Once again, I have no research or definite opinion on this. I just am fascinated and very curious about what your experiences are. So Dana, is it possible to put people into breakout rooms now for about 10 minutes? Just think about those questions and pick one that may be of interest to talk in your breakout room. We'll come back, but we don't have time. We've only got an hour, so we'll come back for some quick comments or something that's really important. Otherwise, it'd be great to see some responses in the chat room. So over to you, Dana. So thanks for those brief, open discussions. I'll just give you a summary of what I heard. Was that this is a mega topic. It's an important topic. Women can prepare, and these are only perceptions that we have, and none of them are completely correct, but there are individual perceptions. Women can prepare differently in going into a coaching conversation. There's a feeling that women may challenge men more, and they can have cleaner conversations with men around emotional baggage. There's some questions around, what does it all mean to be authentic as a male and a female leader? And when, for some people in the experience in the training sector, that men were quite open when they were training, but in coaching they tend to they sort of revert back, and they don't open up as much in coaching, whereas they may in training. And a question that was raised was, is introspection harder for men? Look, we might, we'll probably cover some of those topics, which would be wonderful. So let's, I'm just going to race on. So just some, so I do, and we do at Leading Well, systemic work. So very, very fascinated with systems and systems that we're in, but also what our past systems are, our past systems that we have experienced, what they bring to our work as leaders or as our work in coaching conversations. So men and women can come from very different life experiences, even though the systems may be the same. But they experience systems in a different way, or can experience systems in a different way. So leaders are likely to bring into their organisations a whole heap of past systems, ways of thinking, stories to be told, ways that you are supposed to or expected to interact with people. So their family system, their educational system, their social and cultural system, and their previous organisational systems. And they're very, very strong systems that often subconsciously influence how we present in our current organisation as a leader, and also how we present in a coaching conversation. So themes, and the themes that we may bring with us subconsciously or consciously, are around patriarchy, so a male-dominated society, colonialism. It's very interesting when you look at Indigenous writings and the effect of colonialism, which is largely male-led, I'd say predominantly always male-led, and how we, both men and women, stereotype the male and the female. So they're sort of common themes. And look, this next slide is a lot to, I will read it, it's a lot to take in, but I thought this captured, this is just a quote, and I'll just quickly read it. In many ways, issues that, and this is talking about mental health. So we were just talking about systems from the past, but how that can affect mental health and well-being. Issues that lead to poor mental health often have some relation to a man's adherence to masculine ideals and norms. That is, the extent to which he buys into socially prescribed rules about what it means to be a man. So there's a sense of worth that men have in general that are tied up with external indicators of success. So what they're doing or what they have rather than what they are. So career achievement, money making, things that they provide for their families. And this, and a natural, I'm not sure whether it's genetic or testosterone related, a competitiveness in the workplace, and it can be quite unhealthy, and a sacrifice of other things in life to achieve their success. So I'm sure you've, or you may have experienced men in their 40s and 50s who go, what was that all about? I've worked all my life and now my family have left me or I don't know them. And so that commitment to, external indicators of success, career achievement, those sort of things. And so sometimes they then get this sense of failure, a failure to win the competition with other men and a failure to meet their family's needs. And then on top of that, too often many men do not talk about mental health, about feeling down, sad or depressed, and may not mention emotional or behavioural difficulties. And when they do disclose problems, for example, to medical practitioners, they talk about functional problems, I'm sore in my neck, those types of things. And sometimes they will talk of existential concerns, like I don't actually know what makes me happy, but they don't get the connection with mental health and a sense of well-being. So what I've just quickly done for purposes of this seminar is to map past systems with systemic principles. And this may be quite new to you to be thinking from a systemic point of view, but it's a really interesting way to approach coaching. And so there's a number of what we call principles that are always part of human systems: purpose, belonging, order, exchange, connections, and health. They're just some of the important ones. And so when I think about purpose, then men may bring with them, I've got to provide and protect. Career is important, and that might lead to an over-identification with a role. So you become less of a person and you become more of your role. I've got to be competitive to win. It's what I'm supposed to do, what I'm expected to do, what society expects me to do, not what I feel authentically myself. There's a beautiful study called the Man Box. There's one in Australia, I think it's in the US as well, where the survey is looking at younger men and looking at society expectations versus what they really feel inside. And the difference is dramatic. So there's this societal expectation about this is what it means to be a real man. And then there's a tendency to show strength. And you might know of Brené Brown's work. And for her, or her research showed that shame in women is about not being perfect in a very complex society when you can't possibly be perfect. So that's how, in her research, it showed that shame is linked to imperfection, which means less than 100%. It doesn't mean dramatic imperfection, it just means less than 100%. Whereas for men, shame is related to weakness, so a lack of strength. And so there's a tendency to show strength through fixing. So this is the way I do things, this is the way I've always done it, and I'm going to keep going. And where that becomes difficult is in this complex world where we've got polarities and other complexities. And so it's really hard for men to understand that to be vulnerable can be a demonstration of strength. Vulnerability is not a weakness. So that's one tip in talking to men about strength. And, you know, strength is something that men understand. They understand physical strength. They don't quite understand emotional strength. Belonging, a fundamental human need. You know, I've got to be a real man. I've got to be a man to belong. I've got to be part of the boys, the gang. Once again, I know what I have to do, what I'm supposed to do, even if it goes against my values. I know what I'm supposed to do to fit in, to be part of the boys. And also, once again, this, you know, in order to belong, you can't be authentic if it's not manly. So you never do anything. This is in an extreme situation, but it's quite common. You never do anything that's more feminine or to express emotion. The two emotions, some people jokingly say the only two emotions that men have are anger and humour against others, so mocking other people. So not laughing for something that's funny, but mocking other people. From an order point of view, an order within a system, there's an unstated privilege in walking in the footsteps of previous male leaders that men are very unaware of, and this is stereotyping, and there are you know, positive exceptions to this, and hopefully, I think through the generations, increasingly positive exceptions that, you know, around privilege. And another part of order is coming in from your family system is I am my father or I am not my father. So there can be two different toilets depending on experiences and relationship with father. And then order in an organisation can come with how a man sees order in an organisation can come with him from his relationship with men and women in the family. And all these things come with a person, and we don't see them unless we try and unpack them, or we try and explore the possibilities of some of these systems affecting the stories that they tell themselves. Connections, you know, the real man, let's call him the real man, has to be individualistic and has to be competitive. It's very much about I'm right, you're wrong, I win, you lose. Very, very competitive to the detriment of the other person. And yet they strongly connect, men strongly connect socially in sport, for example. And then in health of their own system, you need to be, you know, as a man, I need to be strong. I can't seek help because that's a sign of weakness. Okay, so lots there in as far as how men bring their systems with them. And interestingly, you may think that, you know, women, and they do, significantly struggle in a patriarchal system, but men do as well, particularly those that want to be authentic and they can't be because they have to be a real man in order to belong. So in order to fit in, you've got to do what the gang's doing. And interestingly, oftentimes you've got to do what the bully in the gang is doing to get their validation. So another quick breakout room. Sorry, Dana, I didn't give you much warning, but we're running close to time. So just 5 or 6 minutes. So I'd just really like to think, for you to think about and be curious about your future and your coaching of men. And this applies to whether it's a male coach or a female coach. Why could coaching men be different? Or do we come from a humanistic perspective and be neutral to gender? That would be another way of saying, well, coaching men does not have to be different. And then another curious question of what might we need to be more aware as we coach our male clients. I have talked here specifically about men in leadership, but of course you could be coaching men that are not in leadership positions, but that's my area of interest, so I've focused on men in leadership. So a quick 5 minutes, and then we'll come back in and we'll round off. Thanks, Dana. Well, welcome back, everybody. I hope that was interesting once again, and we won't go around the room for comments this time, but know that after I finish, we'll be online for another half hour, and so we can continue any conversations. So just very quickly, I wanted to share with you that, and I really admire that EMCC is research-based, and so these are not just my thoughts. And here are some selected references. The only reference that I could find around gender and coaching was Buckingham and Hargraves, which was really an interview about is gender a factor in successful coaching relationships. They basically said, no, we don't think it really is. But that was the only reference to gender in coaching. And then some of the other references around men and mental health and psychology are listed there, and the man box is the one that I just quickly mentioned. You know, interestingly, some people there is a lot about the impact of past systems on men, and just as an example, when following the rules is bad for well-being, the effects of gendered rules in the Australian construction industry is interesting. Interestingly too, male psychology is a relatively new discipline from a research point of view and from a depth point of view. And Liddon and Barry just published a book last year on perspectives in male psychology and introduction. So, you know, just a few references, and otherwise, thank you. And we can now have some questions, but knowing that people may need to leave because the hour's finished, but knowing that there's another half hour that I'll stay on, and hopefully Dana will stay on as well.